Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Greg Zumach at Ivy Futures on whatever that website is. Greg, how's it going, man?
Hey, how you doing?
I am good. I'm sitting here and we're recording on video. I've got this thing healing on my lip right now. I have to make the joke. I had the opportunity to make this joke that I wasn't hit in the face by Jose Ramirez. I'm just healing a little sore on my face, so I didn't take the Tim Anderson approach. That's good.
Well, man, you're probably then the third best shortstop in Chicago.
I'm actually behind Dansby, the Nico, and then
Right.
me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
mean,
Yep.
I think I am anyways, even prior to Tim Anderson being knocked out. So no, we're here today. We're recording. I'm glad to have you back on. Last time you were on was draft season stuff. You were on like three straight. You were on the Northside Bound YouTube feed on three straight episodes. I feel like between the pre-draft, the draft, and the post-draft, you're going crazy. Are you now calmed down from all the draft chaos?
Well, hold on. Do you want to check the schedule? I think we have a full hour of talking about the draft right now, right? No. I'm happy to be turning the page to 2024. We'll get into some of that content here down the line, but no, settling in, enjoying some major league games, enjoying the minor league games. Iowa Cubs are heading to Omaha this week, so tomorrow, Thursday, and I think Sunday I should be there at the Iowa Cubs games with the Storm Chasers, so I get my fill of PCA. I believe I've got it down for Jordan Wicks on Thursday, but not quite sure. And just excited to see the prospects.
Yeah, dude, you texted me today. You're like, "Hey, any idea what the rotation looks like in Iowa?" I was
No
like,
idea.
I sent you a picture." So the way that I typically keep track of what the rotations look like at each affiliate is I have a spreadsheet just with the entire organization, and then I have that rotation kind of laid out in the spreadsheet. And right now, the Iowa rotation is just, I mean, I had two guys slotted in. It was Nick Neidert and Jordan Wicks, but I think I had them on the incorrect days. It's just wild right now in Iowa with, I know, Michael Rucker making a start. Caleb Killian getting called up, Ben Brown going on the IL, Riley Thompson's on the IL, like just a lot of like uncertainty with that Iowa rotation right now. I know that we will get into some more Iowa talk at the tail end of this episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the relievers, not necessarily the starting rotation, but there's a whole lot of relievers in Iowa right now. They do have a full pitching staff, pitching staff there. It's just not of starting pitchers. They have a ton of relievers. So we're going to get into that towards the tail end of the episode and who can potentially help in the MLB bullpen later this year or soon, not even necessarily later this year. And we're also going to get into a little bit of Luis Devers talk this episode. We're gonna our big part of this episode is going to be a little bit of talk on pitching development and our opinions on that as a whole in this organization. The kind of conservative approach to how they've kind of dealt with pitch counts, with the way they've gone about innings limits, stuff like that. So we'll get into that. That'll be the big part of this episode. But before anything, we first want to talk about the MLB Pipeline top 100 and top 30s, which are going to be coming out pretty soon from uh, Jonathan Mayo and Jim Callis. You want me to go ahead and dig into what Callis said in an article first? All right. So Callis wrote this article very like really any day now. We're going to be seeing updated rankings over there at Pipeline. But I'm going to go ahead and just read off this quote. We tweeted this out over at Northside Bound on Twitter. This is what Callis had to say about the Cubs organization and the depth that they have. He says, quote, "The Cubs system has improved more than any other in the last 2 years. Their organizational talent came in at 22nd in our preseason rankings in 2021 and should push for top 5 when those update in the very near future. They finally have a wave of pitching heading to Wrigley Field and also have a number of talented position players. Chicago has four prospects in our current top 100: outfielders PCA and Kevin Alcantara, right-handers Cade Horton and Ben Brown, and it has even more knocking on the door with catcher Moises Ballesteros, outfielder Owen Casey, middle infielders Matt Shaw and James Triantos, and left-hander Jackson Ferris, all coming in the discussion for next week's top 100. Jefferson Rojas, an 18-year-old shortstop holding his own in Single A, has a high ceiling and could push for top 100 in the future." Um, I'll just kick it straight to you. What's your reaction to what Callis has to say there? Which a lot of praise for the Cubs system.
Well, so he's one of now many to mention that the Cubs are in that definitely consensus like top 10 type of farm system, but really pushing that top 5. And there's probably some folks, and maybe they're not the viewers that are watching this because that's kind of the topic. I don't know why you're tuning in if you're just gonna, you know, crap all over prospects, but they basically say that, like, well, that's what the Cubs should do. They tanked and they didn't. So tanking is like what the Baltimore Orioles did. And it's what the Cubs did, like in from 2012 to 2014, right? Like hellaciously bad. Obvious top 10 picks every single year, very, very bad. Cubs didn't do that. They had one top 10 pick in the last, what, like 8, 9 years or whatever, something like that. It's not quite that much. So the Cubs didn't tank. They built. It doesn't mean that everything was perfect. It doesn't mean every pick was perfect. It doesn't mean that every trade was perfect. That wasn't the case. But they've got now a fairly consensus, like, top 5 system. They took some swings in the draft, swings that not a lot of people liked at the time. You know what? They've looked pretty good. So, that's all encouraging. And it is set up next to the fact that the major league team is doing well, right? Like if the Cubs sold off again for the 3rd straight year, and that's the reason they're a top 5 system, then I think we need to have a lot more scrutiny about the major league team and the front office decision making. But they bought, and they're still sitting there at a really good spot. So I'm encouraged about that. I'm also encouraged by a few of the names that Jim Callis brought up specifically, which is now the second time, at least that I can think of. Kylie McDaniel had the first one, with Moises Ballesteros being a top 100 type of caliber player. That's really difficult to find for a player that, I don't know, I'm a little skeptical about his ability to play catcher. I definitely want to give him this offseason, but I'm a little skeptical on that. So I'm kind of looking at him more like a first base DH. But man, I tell you, that bat plays. And to be at that level and that bat playing and to be getting top 100 stuff, I mean, I was reading that quote and I was like, this is very exciting stuff. And Trianto's got another kind of name toss out, shout out there. Fangraphs already has him as the top 100 type of player. I think that's kind of fun. These are guys that we're not thinking about as much, and so to see them there is exciting.
Yeah, I think that we're in a similar position as we were preseason in terms of the number of guys we have sniffing top 100s, right? We kept talking about that was the topic of discussion going into the season where, like, the Cubs had at the time, I think it was consensus 2 guys in the top 100. It was just PCA and Kevin Alcantara. And then they had Owen Casey, Jordan Wicks, um, they had James Triantos a few places. They had Brennan Davis. They had a few guys sniffing that top 100 in the top like 150 or so. So that was like the trend this offseason. And I think people were getting sick and tired of hearing that over and over again, how the Cubs have 6 of the top 150. And I think the fun thing now is we're seeing PCA and Kevin Alcantara remain in the top 100 that were there beginning of the season. And we've added Cade Horton, who is absolutely a consensus top 100 guy. And really, like, if you look at PCA and Cade Horton, now the Cubs have 2 guys. PCA, who is, I listened to an argument that he's a top 5 prospect in baseball. I don't know that I'd say that, but I listened to an argument. I'd also listen to an argument that Cade Horton is the best right-handed pitching prospect in all of baseball. I don't know that I agree with that, but I listened to an argument. And then you have these guys that are sniffing the top 100s and guys that are probably closer to top 100s than they were preseason, right? I'm thinking of Jackson Ferris, who is, I could see him being a top 100 guy for sure. Owen Casey, who has absolutely showed out in Double-A as a 20-year-old. These guys, this is not necessarily the same as what we saw preseason, but still a very positive outlook about this entire system.
Yeah, I mean, the Cade Horton thing is fascinating because this guy is really like consensus top 50. He allowed you to get Jackson Ferris. I mean, I can understand an argument for, and I think it's a good argument for, if you could go back and redraft, you'd probably take Zach Neto over him. But other than that, I don't think there's another guy that I'm popping. And I'm high on Drew Gilbert. I'm high on a few other guys, but I mean, I think we've thrown this out there before, but if you're doing a redraft in the 2022 draft, it's Jackson Holiday miles away, of course. Definitely. But then, like, Neto or Horton, is probably your 2-3. The Cubs got him under slot at 7. That was a good move. I'm not saying that's just one person making that deal, but I think that they made a good call on that. It's fun. The Brennan Davis 2023 season is very disappointing.
It's
I
sad.
think things look very different if Brennan is the Brennan that we know. I hope someday he gets back there. Cubs or otherwise, I want to root for the guy.
Hmm.
I think he's awesome, and that one is the one that I'd say that a lot of folks with rankings still had him in the top 100, and to see him fall off, he's probably the only guy that really truly fell off. Kevin Alcantara never should have fallen off. That was very silly, massive overreaction to a very young kid at South Bend. Midwest League? Are you kidding me? Has anybody experienced a Midwest winter? Like,
Yeah.
that's so silly. A Midwest
Unfortunately, I
April.
have.
Yes, yeah, me too. I've been a recipient of a few of them. So outside, and that's normalized, and that's looked fine now. But Brennan's probably the only one that's really fallen off. We've seen a few guys ascend. I get questions all the time. Well, what about Matt Shaw? I mean, just hang out there. Like, the guy is a fairly quick moving bat, but they were picking at 13. There's no guarantee that he's going to be a top 100
Yeah.
guy right away.
Honestly, like that was the last point I wanted to hit on with this was Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw being mentioned by Callis as
Yeah.
right around top 100. You don't expect at 13, at the 13th overall pick, you do not expect. I tweeted this out before the draft happened. I was like, do not expect to get a top 100 guy with the 13th overall pick. That's not normal. I know you can point to a guy like Cam Collier from the year before, who I think was selected even lower than 13, that he's a top 100 prospect right after his like draft year. But that's a different situation where he was projected much higher, fell because of other reasons. Like it's different.
And paid. I mean, he
And
was
paid. He's paid
paid.
like a top 10 at least guy, right?
Oh yeah, he was paid. I think like the 6th overall value.
Yeah.
We're very close
So
to it. So
getting Matt Shaw at 13 at slot was not expected to be a top 100 guy. So it's great that he's there. It's great that he's even sniffing that top 100.
yeah.
And he's been pretty damn good since he was assigned to South Bend already this year.
Yeah, I think they'll look back on things and feel pretty solid about it. But no, it's an ascending system still. They were able to buy at the deadline without, and mad respect for the folks. I love DJ Hers. I love Kevin Made. Two of the biggest guys that I've been hyping up for years, but also excited for them to get an opportunity. They were able to buy at the deadline, and their system still looks really strong. That's like the win-win. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's fun. It's a
Yeah.
fun time.
You want to talk pitching? I'll let you
Do it.
go to introduce this. I know that you kind of brought up this idea, and I think that this is really good. I'll let you introduce this topic.
Yeah. So this is going to be it's not the reckoning or anything. I think it is just opening up the conversation, because these conversations have started popping up in different places, which is the Cubs have made some developments with the pitching infrastructure. Like, people talk about the pitch lab. People get tired of you talking about the pitch lab, but there's proof even at the major league level that the Cubs have made some pitching development improvements. Cade Horton's another good example. Yes.
Real quick on that before you keep
Yeah.
going is I wanted to point out how hilarious it's becoming that the goalposts are moving as far as being able to talk crap about the pitch lab. How it used to be like, oh, the pitch lab, what have they produced at the major league level? And now it's like, now the goalposts are set at like, oh, well, they've only produced Justin Steele, who's a
Yeah.
Cy Young candidate. It's
Amazing.
like, I mean, let's stop moving the goalposts on that. All right, continue.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that is pretty funny. Because if we talk about, I had an interview with Jim Callis, one of the first ones I ever did, and he basically was just like, the pitch lab. We hear all about the pitch lab. Do something, and then we'll talk about it. And at the time, we were basically thinking like, man, Rowan Wick picked up a spike curveball.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
this guy's
yeah.
pitching the 7th inning for you. This is
Yep.
legit. And now it's like, Justin Steele is a Cy Young guy. We've got a homegrown closer. Brandon Hughes went from outfielder to a fairly lockdown reliever, well healthy. Yeah. Look, the Cubs aren't, no one is saying that they are the top know-it-all pitching organization, but people feel pretty good when you ask outside the organization how the Cubs are doing at pitching. So here's the question. Are the Cubs too conservative from a pitching development standpoint, especially in the minor leagues. And, you know, the way I think we should view this first or talk about this is yes or no, one word answers, and then let's jump into it. So, Greg, what do you think?
Yes. I think it's more nuanced than that, and we'll get into that. But my answer is yes. What are your thoughts?
My answer is I, give me a couple words here. I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
I think so.
It's I think that I'll dig in first on to kind of what we're talking about here. So I know that people have probably noticed, and you said that there's been chatter about it on the two things being the innings restrictions over the course of a year and then the pitch limits over the course of a game. And this is a matter of pitching prospects, whether you're a top pitching prospect or someone you're trying to develop as an organization type guy, are not being allowed to go to really exceed 120 innings pitched over the course of a minor league season. And then the same goes for over the course of one outing. Really, 90 pitches is that threshold. I pulled up the numbers. I went through every starter from this year in the organization, and this year there's been only one starting pitcher occurrence the entire season where a guy has thrown more than 90 pitches. Ben Brown threw 93 in a start. I think it was in May. That was the only time that's happened all year long. There's been a lot of occurrences of kind of right around 85 to 90, like 85 to 89 pitches, but there's a very clear like threshold that like pitchers are not allowed to hit that 90 pitch mark in a start. And so I think that's kind of what we're talking about. And I think where the question comes in is if a guy is not allowed to go deep into a start, into sixth and seventh inning, eighth inning, absolutely not the eighth inning, or deep into starts in terms of 100 pitches, 110 pitches, or even like 95 pitches, how can they get that experience of doing that at the major league level? They will have never done it at the minor league level. So how can they do that at the major league level?
Yeah. I don't have an answer for you on that. And so let me, when I started this, my first thought is yes, definitely. They are too conservative. My issue is not the 90 pitch mark for Ben Brown. Because or the others, I mean, like the 90 pitch mark is the upper echelon. My big issue is actually the lower levels of how they're working.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's take two examples here. And, Cade Horton. Cade Horton, I think, is a good example. I'm not arguing that Cade Horton should be throwing 100 pitches per outing every 5 games. I truly don't think so. I would much, much, much rather handle him with kid gloves.
Mm-hmm.
I think people confuse the fact that he's one of the top pitching prospects in baseball with the fact that he's thrown a lot. He hasn't. He threw like 53 innings last year. So he's already over that limit. And I'm totally fine with them being conservative. He pitches about every 6th or 7th day, which is similar to what he would be doing in college had he gone back. So I'm good on all of these things. My issue is this guy gets to about 50-something pitches, and that's it.
Yeah.
He rarely eclipses 60. And I have a hard time contextualizing that internally when it's every 6 or 7 days. Do we really feel like 80 pitches is out of the limit? Do we feel like 75 pitches is out of the limit? Because the Cubs apparently do. And I'm not making the claim that I know more than Craig Breslow because that would be silly. Like the guy could forget.
I do. I know way more than Craig Breslow.
Well, there you go. So you are the superior Greg is what I'm getting. And while we already knew that, I can't say that I do. And I'll get to why I think there's something to be said for what the Cubs are doing here in a minute. But my original point is that I have a hard time thinking that we really can't have Cade Horton throw 75 pitches every like 6 or 7 days. That seems like that doesn't jive in. That seems like a number that we've identified, we as in the Cubs have identified internally as we're just not going to do that, even though I don't care about what happens in the game, but like even though these could be 60 breeze through pitches, he should probably be allowed. These are not the same things. So it seems like we're putting a numerical value on something that should have slightly more nuance, especially when it comes to had he gone to college, this guy would be throwing 110 pitches every 7 days. And
At
no,
least.
at least we would get to the College World Series. This guy would be throwing Skeens level number of pitches. So I think a bit much. Jackson Ferris is my other example here. That one is even more extreme. This is a guy that probably would have been Ole Miss's maybe Sunday starter. Again, throwing, 80, 90, 100 pitches every week. And has he top 50? I can't remember if he's top 50.
I'll tell you in about 10 seconds here.
Okay.
Yes.
It's pretty extreme.
Yeah, Jackson Ferris this year, he had his last outing, he got to 60.
Oh, okay.
His highest this season is 62. But
Okay.
we're looking at on average. Actually, I'll pull that up here.
Yeah.
On average, he is looking at 52 pitches per outing.
Yeah. And Ferris is definitely getting, he's an every 6th, every 7th kind of day kind of starter. And so I think we can push it a little bit. I think the Cade Horton thing is more extreme. This is a guy that has thrown over 100 pitches per outing. I feel like there's a middle ground there that you could look at and say, hey, you know what? He's throwing 80 pitches per outing, and we can probably feel pretty good about it. I don't know. It feels slightly too extreme for me.
You know what's fun about this is that you and I are very new age baseball type guys for the most part, right?
Yep.
And this feels like we are putting on the other hat where we're going old school. It's like, hey, let these guys throw, let these guys get deeper in outings, and that's a very old school type way of thinking, I guess. But so it's fun to put on that hat, and I think that what it comes down to for me is that these guys aren't really being allowed to work through things, right? Because they have the number of pitches they can't exceed throughout the course of a game. They also have that over the course of an inning. I understand it more over the course of one inning, where it's simply 30 pitches over the course of an inning. That makes sense. But you need to allow for a guy to reach that 70 pitch mark, start to get a little fatigued, and that's when a guy starts to lose his command and control, is when he starts to get fatigued. The mechanics go away. He loses some fastball velo. He needs to rely on hitting the edges of the zone. He needs to rely on being mentally and physically strong enough to continue to be consistent with the way he delivers the baseball. And he's not. These guys aren't getting to that point. When you're at 60 pitches, if you're topping out like Cade Horton at 70 pitches max, then you're just not getting to that point between 70 and 90, between 90 and 100 pitches, where it's a different feeling on your body, That's what is concerning to me. And it kind of goes back to the conversation that I was having last week with Brian, in that this is a situation now. I think that the new age part of baseball is, if the guys have good stuff, let's jump them up through the organization pretty fast, because we don't want them to waste bullets, right?
Yes.
So you get Cade Horton up to the major league level as fast as you possibly can, because that's major league quality stuff. And then if he can't succeed at the major leagues, then you can send him back down to AAA to have him work on some things before getting fully ready to make it back up to the bigs. The problem with doing that is they haven't experienced what it's like to go deeper in games. And David Ross, or whoever the manager is fully expecting these guys to go deeper in starts. So you're going from a guy that's throwing 70 to 80 pitches to a guy that's being asked to go at least 90 pitches, and they're just not familiar with that. So they are going to fail once they reach the major leagues. They're not comfortable with that way of throwing. I'm picturing guys like Ben Brown and Cade Horton and Jordan Wicks, who will be up soon, very, very soon, for all three of these guys. And I'm just worried about them going up to the bigs, really, really struggling, and that affecting them mentally as well, and saying, I can't get out at the major league level. And that kind of Caleb Killian-ish, right? Where that completely changed the way he threw and the way he pitched. And so I'm just worried about it from that perspective, I guess. And I want to see these guys go deeper in starts to see how they react to adversity deeper in starts.
Yeah, there's a value in experiencing fatigue. And if the first time you experience fatigue is on the major league mound,
rough.
That honestly, that's rough. Now, that's not the first time the Cade Hortons ever experienced fatigue.
No.
It's not the first time the Ben Browns have ever experienced fatigue. But that's where I'm at. So let me spin this a different way and try to play the devil's advocate here.
I was going to do the same thing. I'd love to hear your perspective on the spin zone.
And so we've seen that the Cubs have done They've built out their pitching development in 3 steps. The first is to train velocity, the second is to build an arsenal, and the third is really to then assess command and try to build within the zone, inside and outside the zone. And so, especially with players in their build velocity stage, here's my devil's advocate for this. Maybe the Cubs internally, and they've probably talked to a lot of people about this, feel that the best way to train velocity is to throw at higher velocity for less pitches. In the same way that one would be strength training, right? Like what's the, if you there's a lot of different ways to work out, right? But if you're doing muscle building, you can do 5 reps of 5 at your highest strength ever. I realize if you look at me, you wouldn't be like, yeah, let's hear what this guy has to talk
I was
about
gonna say I
about
can't relate
weightlifting.
to any of these conversations, so I don't know.
That's
This
fine.
is new to me.
I you can just imagine me very built and saying these things, but like this is at least I know the science behind it. Is that you could do 5 reps of 5 with a ton of strength, right? Like heavy weight, move heavy weight. That's strength training, or you can do less weight and more reps, and that's a different type of training there. That's kind of the same thing, right? Like you can throw more pitches at less velocity, more pitches with less effort, I think is the biggest point. Or you can throw higher velocity, higher effort with less pitches.
But what about when you take that and then stretch that out, right? So
Yep.
if you're training in that way to be a guy that throws harder for shorter stints as a reliever does,
Yep.
then how does that translate to then, all right, now let's move on from that. Let's stretch you out longer. Does that velo then maintain to this new way of pitching? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either, and that's the big question I have. That's why it's like I think they're a little too conservative. Maybe there's something behind it, but like there's going to be an adjustment period. I don't want to go so far as to say a reckoning, but there's going to be an adjustment period for these pitchers. Like when we take Jackson Ferris and he gets to 80 pitches in an outing someday, eventually, like he's going to sit there and it is going to be an adjustment. And we are just going to have to live with the fact, and the Cubs are going to have to live with the fact that there's going to be some outings where he goes 4 1/3 with 9 Ks, and then he gets in, and then gives up 3, 4 runs or 4 walks or whatever, and he just has to push through that. We saw it with Justin Steele. Justin Steele's a guy that really excelled in short outings. The Cubs built him up slowly, slowly, slowly. Now he's doing what he's doing. He was able to really gut through in terrible weather a 100 plus pitch outing against the Braves, which, my God, that is a juggernaut of an offense. He was able to do it. The Cubs did build him up slowly. So maybe there is something to be said for that, because this is a guy that started as this multi-inning incinerator
Mm-hmm.
to a starting pitcher throwing got up to 119 innings last year to
Yeah.
now he's at 120 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it works out, but it isn't going to be a smooth sail for everybody.
So that kind of leads into my spin zone a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that I mean mine's a little crazier, and I'm saying this, and I don't know. I believe much more in my opinions that we already discussed than what I'm getting ready to
Yeah.
discuss. Let me preface it by saying that. Uh, remember years like not even years ago, like prior to this season, I was kind of the one shouting for I wanted piggybackers at the major league level. I wanted a lot of piggybackers. I wanted like a rotation of just piggyback outings where it's like you see Hayden Wesneski for 3 or 4 innings, and then you see Javier Assad for 3 or 4 innings. But I wanted to see that with pitching prospects coming up. I wanted to see Jordan Wicks called up and ready to go for 3 or 4 innings, like Justin Steele was when he was first called up. I wanted to see a lot of that, and then you can count on maybe like Marcus Stroman being your guy to go 7 innings. You can count on, I guess, Justin Steele now to be that guy to go 7 innings. Guys like that, you have like 2 guys in the rotation that is what they're dedicated to, and then like 6 other guys that are all piggybackers. That feels like this is what they're being trained to do. I don't now that I'm looking at Cade Horton, now that I'm looking at Ben Brown, I don't want to see that happen. I was saying that prior to seeing what type of high upside pitching prospects we had. When I was saying that before, it was like DJ Hers and Luke Little were the guys I wanted to see doing that at the big league level. Now we got DJ Hers out of the organization. You got Luke Little as a 1 inning reliever in AAA. They've gone a different route, but it still feels like they're training them in that way, where I think the organization, in terms of what type of pitching prospects they have, don't work that way. I guess if that makes sense. I'm just not about it as much. But my spin zone is that if they want to do that, at one point I was all about that. I was all about going that method, and maybe that is the way they're going to bring guys up and make sure they get comfortable, a la Justin Steele. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if they internally feel like a guy is a likely reliever at the next level, then I this is going to sound really crass. I don't really care how they develop them because I think that they already have an idea in mind and they're just rolling with it.
Yeah.
But you don't take Cade Horton 7 if you think like, oh, that guy's going to be a lockdown closer, right? Like you're taking him because you think he's a starting pitcher. You're not paying Jackson Ferris $3 million because you're like, man, this guy's going to be sick out of the 7th inning out of the pen. You're taking him because you think that he can be a starter at the next level. Now, maybe their play dictates that, but at the end of the day, you're taking them because you think they're a starter. I think they're attack conservative. I think that there's a middle ground that they can build towards here. And maybe I get some snarky message at the end of this that's kind of like, no. Like we feel good with what we're doing, and that's fine. And I respect it because they do have more internal information than I do, obviously. But I still think like at the end of this is that, look, there is probably a data point that they've got, not an Excel spreadsheet, is certainly something more advanced, but like a data point that says for this particular person, this is our number. Yeah, that he's got it actually. What you don't know is that Greg is actually signed on to the Cubs Slack. And so he just gets all the stuff that they post in the Jets League channel.
I'm messaging Craig Breslow saying, hey, did you know that Cade Horton has only thrown 1,000 pitches this year? Hey, did you know that Cade Horton his max is 79 pitches in an outing this year? Did you know that he's averaging 63? It's like, that's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Yes, I'm sure Craig loves it.
Yeah. Me and Craig.
That's like right. This. Just super tight. But, I mean, I think that there's like a happy medium to this that they could get to. And maybe this is a slight overcorrection, but because they don't want people to get hurt. And I get that. I think there's a happy medium. I'd be interested to hear professional opinions on it. But at the end of the day, it's because I think that there's a data point that they've identified of this is the number of pitches for this guy. We don't feel comfortable going over it, but we can probably use some context there, and maybe they just don't feel comfortable with the context. And I get it, but yeesh.
I think what I keep coming back to, this is the last thing I'll say on this, is what I keep coming back to is Cade Horton. Mm-hmm. And I know this is happening to I know we've talked a lot about Cade Horton. It just feels like the prime example of this. I know there's a lot of the entire rest of the system is experiencing this exact same thing. Jordan Wicks is not being allowed to go as deep as I think that he should. But look at Cade Horton. If he is only going on average 60 pitches per game, why is he not doing that in Chicago right now? If they don't care, right? I don't think that he should be up in Chicago, but if they don't care about him dealing with adversity in a start, if they think that his stuff is that good, which I know his stuff is that good, then why is he not throwing 60 pitches at the major league level right now? What's the difference between doing that in Chicago and doing that in
Yeah, I mean, different types of adversity. I mean, there's command issues. So let's take the major league success out of it. Like, let's say the Cubs were selling.
Yeah.
And they're just like, we're just going to give this guy some opportunities. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, the jump from Double-A to these things.
I don't think that I don't think that's what they should do. It's just I think my point is my Stephen A. Smith side of this is however, he's good, right? Like he's good enough to do that. He has the stuff. I just don't waste bullets.
Yeah.
If you're worried about wasting bullets, if you're worried about that jump from 60 pitches to 90 pitches, if you're worried about those 30 pitches that he's going to throw extra, then why are you letting him throw the 60 in Tennessee and not those 60 in the major league level? You're wasting bullets in that way.
Well, to do an even more or less extreme example, why is Ben Brown pitching in AAA?
Why is Jordan Wicks there? Why is
to throw them in the pen right now?
Why was Riley Thompson down there?
Yes,
with his injury history. It's
I
I don't know.
understand that point very much. So at the end of the day, I'll say yes, I think they're conservative. I'm totally willing to admit that there's context that I don't have. Please feel
Yes.
free to reach out to me and tell me I'm very silly for this. Um, or Greg can just ask Craig Breslow later tonight.
Yeah. Now, I think to wrap this up, I think that
Yeah.
there is absolutely logic behind why they're doing this.
Mm,
We don't have that information. We don't have that knowledge. We're not like
yeah.
you and I are not. I can speak for myself. We're not smart enough to be able to determine what is best in terms of their arm health. So I'm still trusting that this is the right decision. This is a conversation about our frustrations with it,
Oh
whether it's
yeah.
right or even if it's the correct way to do it. I'm just frustrated, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah. Don't let anybody think that we're specifically saying that this is a poor decision making. I just don't understand it, and it's because I don't have enough information. We'll see how it all turns out. One way or the other, we will see. So, let's get into another pitcher
Yes.
because we've discussed so many briefly here within the context of the system. But I think we need to talk about the previous Cubs minor league pitcher of the year, and that is Luis Devers, who, I mean, prior to this year, my biggest concern was he doesn't throw with a lot of velocity. He's not getting a ton of Ks. He got some Ks. He's been racking up Ks. He's been kind of showing out, and he's going to make for a very difficult decision in December.
Yeah. He has definitely been building up. So he returned from injury. His first outing back this year was on June 6th. He's back in South Bend where he ended the year last year, and it was entirely about just building up and getting healthy again and making sure he was in a place where he ended a year ago. And I think now at this point, he's had back-to-back starts where he's gone 5 innings with no runs. His most recent start was 5 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. The one before that was 5 innings, 1 hit, 6 strikeouts, no walks. Like it was back to back terrific starts. He is officially, and I tweeted this out, he is officially back where he was at the end of last year, in my opinion. And I think that we can address that in two different ways. I think it's a compliment that he's back to where he was last year. That's awesome. That's terrific. He was Cubs minor league pitcher of the year. Unfortunately, I think he's back to where he was last year, and I don't think I'm seeing anything that's too awful impressive in terms of being having better stuff than we saw a year ago. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I am not seeing the type of stuff that this is a different situation than if this was 2019, 2020, even 2021. This would be the kind of guy that you're like, look at how good this is. Let's make sure we get him locked down to a 40-man slot because he's one of the best pitchers in the organization, and we need that. This is different. The Cubs can, and I know we just spent a whole segment talking about like, are the Cubs making the right decisions from a pitching development standpoint? But realize the context of where we can take this from like internalize this now is because they're having, knock on wood, so much success with their pitching development that we can nitpick
Mm-hmm.
in how they're doing it. So now Devers kind of gets lost in the shuffle. He hasn't taken a step forward. I know there was the time that he hit 96 last year. I totally believe that. But it felt like it was a one-off situation, and
Yeah.
now the stuff is still the same, and it's a guy that's succeeding off of really good command of multiple pitches and a really good pitchability. Like, and I don't mean that insultingly. Like, the guy knows how to pitch.
He was back to last outing. The first inning of work, he was just rolling, dude. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
he was snappy with it. He was changing delivery styles. He was showcasing the changeup even right on right. He was doing all the like high quality Luis Devers stuff that we love, right?
Yeah.
He's got the plus, like the really impressive changeup. He's got the command. I think that we see him probably up in Double A soon. I know that I just wanted to talk on him real briefly here because I know there were a lot of people asking about us to talk about him on the show here, and so I thought it was important. Yeah, I think Luis Devers is a name to follow now. I had been off of him, but remember last year, right? The Cubs minor league pitcher of the year. There was a reason why he was a top 30 prospect in the Cubs system, like this past offseason. I think he's back to that point. Now it's just let's see what he does in Double A. Let's see how the Cubs
Yep.
treat him in the Rule 5 draft. All that good stuff coming up this offseason. So
Yep. I agree.
fun to see him back wheeling and dealing because he's also just fun to watch pitch. In
Mhm.
addition to being a good player, like he's just a fun guy to watch pitch. So
Yep.
All
Completely
right,
agree.
I wanted to hit for our final subject here, our final topic, the relievers in Iowa. And the reason why I want to talk about them, or I guess the pitchers in Iowa that can help the Chicago bullpen, not necessarily the relievers in Iowa, but just the pitchers in Iowa that can help the Chicago bullpen this year, because we kind of expected the Cubs to do more with their bullpen at the trade deadline this I guess last week, right? We saw them go out there and trade Nelson Velasquez for Jose Cuas. That seems like a top notch Cubs quality
Yep.
Cubs
Love
type
it.
of move in terms of a reliever. But we also expected something right at the deadline in terms of a higher leverage arm out of the bullpen. We didn't see that, but there are guys in Iowa that can help the Chicago bullpen come tomorrow, come September.
Yeah, and so really quick on that, I'm not like making some big statement, but I feel pretty comfortable that the Cubs were trying to get another reliever at the deadline. This isn't, I can't say too much, and it's not like I'm breaking huge news there, but I think they were trying pretty significantly to get a starter that the day of the deadline, or a reliever, sorry, the day of the deadline. Prices were high. There were a lot of deals towards the end. I think teams were just looking at other things, getting their business done other ways, and it just didn't work out. And so I've had a lot of comments where people were like, I don't know. Honestly, look, I'm not saying that you have to think that everything that the Cubs front office does is correct, because that's not true. But like, after everything, there's been still a lot of people that were like, "How could Jed not do this? This is a huge mistake." Blah blah blah. And it's like, can we just roll with things for now? Like, this team is winning, and they made big buy moves. So like, they've made some moves there. But I think they were. It just didn't work out. So then the next question is, well, who do you look at internally? And naturally, Iowa is the place to look at. Now they have a new addition. Let's get this off the start right out of the way. Luke Little is up from Double A to Triple A, and it's not impossible to see him locked down. I mean, the Cubs have needs from a at least getting left-handed hitters out, preferably left-handed pitching, but basically however you do it, we'll be thrilled. Luke Little is a big old lefty who throws mid 90s and has a pretty good slider and split change splitter, however you want to describe it. He's not quite there yet, but I am at least excited to see how it turns out.
Luke Little against left-handed hitters this year. Left-handed hitters are hitting 162 off of him with a 162 slugging. They've only hit singles off of Luke Little this year.
Yep, I will
Good
take
for
that.
a
Thank you.
507 OPS. He has been terrific against left-handers. I know that like we have the thing is we don't necessarily need a lefty in the bowl. We need a guy who gets lefties out, like you said. Mark Leiter Jr. does that now. Luke Little can do that, right? I think that Luke Little, if he came up to Chicago right now, a lot like Daniel Palencia, I think he wouldn't look out of place in the Chicago bullpen.
Yeah, I agree with that. My quick thing on Little, and others have talked about this. Brian Smith has talked about this on our 1060 West Discord there. Little shout out is that the fastball metrics, and I would agree. I looked at the numbers too. The fastball metrics on Luke Little aren't as good as you'd think, and part of that is it just doesn't get a lot of ride.
Mm-hmm.
It's and not a ton of velocity like you would expect. This is the guy that he threw 104 in the bullpen, and I believe all that. He's a lot more like 95, 96 these days instead of like 97, 99. And I think it's possible that he gets to that, but he's not there yet. So do I think Luke Little could succeed at the major league level? I think he could this year. In fact, I would bank that he's a pretty decent bet for a September call-up. The thing I like about Luke Little as an option is he's a guy that you throw up in like the middle of September. He doesn't throw a ton of innings, and he's your guy that sneaks onto a playoff roster and is there for one purpose and one purpose only, to come in and get one lefty out to end an inning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that you're also hoping that he's hot at that time, like
Yes.
that time of the year, right? You're hoping with relievers, it's so hit or miss. They can go on poor streaks, and I think that you're hoping to get a hot Luke Little at the time. And I think that this step in Iowa is in the right direction. You got three. You don't have to go into detail. You got three other names in Iowa that kind of catch your eye. Two or three others that catch your eye as potential call-ups.
Totally. I'm actually a little surprised that we didn't get Tyler Duffy Duffy called up already. just because I figure he's probably a guy that just gets called up, even if he, and this isn't mean to be crass or inconsiderate, but even if he gets DFA'd after that, I would just be surprised if he doesn't just get an opportunity here some point. He's pretty solid. He's a solid major league reliever for a while.
I'll throw Shane Green in that same category. I think that
Yeah.
Tyler Duffy, Shane Green, both made tons of major league experience or been around for a long time.
Yep.
Both guys that were signed for one very specific reason, to make it up to Chicago, in whether it's for a day or for the rest of the year. Shane Green and Tyler Duffy are those guys.
Yeah. At some point I was just expected,
Yes.
as long as there's health.
Yes.
And the next guy I'll throw out there is Riley Martin, but I would be pretty surprised this season actually at this point. And so I know this is like not quite exactly what you're asking for, but I thought that Riley Martin would be a good candidate. He doesn't need to be added to the 40 man at the end of the year. It has some real command issues that just popped up recently. Might
Yeah.
be related to the ball strike zone, the automated ball strike zone. But whatever, he's got to get that sorted out. It's not at a playable level, unfortunately, at this point. But I think it can get there. He is a guy that if you told me next year he racks up, 40 innings in the major leagues with a lot of Ks against lefties, I would take that bet. I think that's a fair one. The last guy I'm going to say, I got to admit, he's been doing better, and it's Cam Sanders.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I think it's starting to be there. I'm not saying it's the lockdown guy, but I think if you needed to call up somebody right now and you're willing to make a 40-man roster decision, I think I'm just bringing up Cam. I understand the Duffy or Shane Green here in a little bit
Different
situation.
category though. Different
Different category, but
Yeah.
like if you wanted to take a roll on a guy with somebody who can get a K for you, I think I'm just rolling with Cam now.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Cam is that guy. Bailey Horn is still in that category to a certain degree. He had a really, I think he gave up like 6 runs in his last outing, which just tanked the ERA. But like prior to that was good. So don't look at his, I think, 5+ ERA right now in Iowa. It was one outing. So Bailey Horn is the other guy. I think Bailey Horn, Cam Sanders, both guys. It's like if they get called up tomorrow, I'd be like, oh, yep, that does make sense. I think they contribute to the bullpen right now. They can eat some innings. Not talking high leverage, not talking 8th inning with a 2-run game, but they're that important kind of uh, transition in the 5th and 6th innings. If a guy goes short, but you're still in the mix of the game, I think Cam Sanders and Bailey Horn are those guys. One righty, one lefty. Those are my absolute picks as far as that category goes. If we're talking a guy that might fit closer to that category of Shane Green and Tyler Duffy, give me Brendan Little. Because we know that we saw him in Chicago last year. He hasn't had a phenomenal year this year, but I think that he fits that mold, that same kind of mold as Shane Green and Tyler Duffy. One more name that's a little bit more you want to keep him in your organization more than kind of Brendan Little and the other guys. Chris Clark, who started off the year in the rotation, kind of. He was the Rule 5 pick this past offseason. He came back to the Cubs from the Mariners and was worked as a starter. And then fairly recently, over the last month or so, he was transitioned back into the bullpen. And what he does is he gets ground balls. That's what he does. He goes out there, throws a bowling ball sinker, and gets ground balls. And so that fits a very specific need if the Cubs are to need a ground ball at the major league level, a lot like Luke Little, where it's like, hey, we need you to go get this lefty out to end the inning. Hey, we need a ground ball. Chris Clark might be that guy. So he's kind of an under the radar name to keep your eye on.
I
Anybody
agree
else?
with that. Yeah, no, okay, so let me just address the Jordan Wicks question, because I've had a lot of people send me this. They're like, Cubs need a lefty. Just call up Jordan Wicks. I don't think they do that. And this isn't to like say that those comments aren't valid. I just don't think that that's the strategy they want to do. And part of it is the fact that Jordan Wicks isn't necessarily that guy. He's not this like beastly, I'm going to destroy lefties, I'm kind of struggling with righties situation. I don't actually even know the splits, but just from watching him,
Very reverse splits guy this year.
okay, well then there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't necessarily want to put him into that situation. I think the Cubs have bigger plans for him, and
Mhm.
I'm not too jazzed about that. I would prefer to go other routes. I would prefer to throw Brennan Little up there for a game just to see if it happens, and if it doesn't work out, you wish him his best. That's not necessarily a fair thing. Business in baseball is a terrible business, but like I would rather kind of roll with those situations, I think, and just yeah, I don't think it's Jordan Wicks's time. I think he's proving that he will get there very soon, but just not in this scenario.
We can't not mention Ben Brown here as
Totally.
he hopes to return from the IL. I think that at the end of the season, he is more than anybody, maybe even more than Luke Little, more than Cam Sanders, more than Bailey Horn. He is that guy that can get some legitimate, like big time outs in the major league bullpen this year. He's been a starter. Obviously, they want to limit his innings. I think it just makes sense. He's already on the 40-man roster. It makes all the sense in the world for him to get some innings at the end of the year. Now, is that in kind of middle relief? Is that locking down games towards the latter innings? We'll have to see. It won't be late innings right out the gate, but we can't not mention Ben Brown here in
Yeah.
this conversation.
He's my ideal guy that if you said we needed to roll with somebody for the 5th and 6th inning,
Yeah,
in a game that you're like down by 1 and you just want to get to the 7th, that's that's my guy. If you're going to pick anybody on the staff, that's the way I'm rolling with it.
and that's
Yeah.
really important for a team that is, unless they're blowing out teams by scoring 20 runs, typically they're going to be a team that keeping those margins slim, one, two,
Mhm.
3 runs is super, super important. So that fifth and sixth inning become very important for a guy like Ben Brown or Hayden Wesneski or whoever it might be. So,
Yep.
yeah. All right, dude. I'll let you go ahead and plug yourself here. I know you got some things to plug for sure.
Yeah, totally. So, again, you got the Twitter handle up there at Ivy Features. I use that handle for most places. So, feel free to reach out to me on that. I think I'm on like Blue Sky and Threads and whatever, but not very active, totally admittedly. We do have you find most of my writing on Northside Bound, pretty much all of my writing on Northside Bound. We do have a really thriving community that has been going with on Discord, if that's a thing that people like. It's a little kind of forum-esque stuff, but we've got some fun things planned for there. You can find Greg Huss on there as well. That forum is called 1060 West, all written out 1060 West. But it's a Chicago Cubs community. We've had some really good, fun discussions on there. That at the deadline, it was popping. We had writers from Prospects Live pop in, Brian Smith, Greg Huss, myself, Todd Johnson's on there. We had some good things popping. So we'll have more stuff certainly going on in the off season. And right now the game day chats are pretty hot. But otherwise, yeah, just happy to connect with folks and excited to talk some Cubs prospects.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find me on Threads. Basically, anything that I tweet out that is not a quote tweet, I'm also posting on Threads. So you can find me there at Cubs on Deck. I'm not Out of the Vines there. I am Cubs on Deck on Threads. You can find this podcast anywhere. Leave a rating and review. We always really, really appreciate that. Leave a comment in the comment section below in YouTube. We really appreciate that. We'll try to comment back here for sure. Have a conversation there because I think that anywhere we can kind of take advantage of a different social media platform, we're gonna see what takes off in the coming weeks. Hopefully that Twitter cleans its act up. But in the meantime, find us on 1060 West, find us on Threads, find us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back in your ears in one short week.
Yo.